Well, hello and welcome, friends, to another episode of the Three Books from Hearts and Minds podcast. I'm Sam Levy with the CCO, transforming college students to transform the world. And of course, I'm here, as always, with the one and only Byron Borger of Hearts and Minds Books. Hey, Byron, how are you doing?
Okay, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's an exciting time of year for us in the campus ministry world. It's back to school season. Students are showing up on campus. It's exciting. It's fun. It's busy. Lots going on, and we're getting to work.
Some of my Facebook friends and customers from Hearts and Minds that are viewing this or listening in on podcasts, Sam works for the CCO, as you've kind of figured out, and they are a campus ministry organization. Beth and I worked for them at a small branch campus of Penn State back in the 70s and have been affiliated ever since as a campus outreach group that works with churches, partnering with churches to try to reach college students for Christ. So when he says going back to college, that's work for them, right? We're coming up on Labor Day, and we're going to talk about work a little bit, some books about work today. But that's your work. It's kind of a fun job, actually, although it's hard, hanging out with students, leading people to Christ, discipling students, offering them a vision of the full life of the kingdom of God. It's not easy doing that kind of work and hanging out with kids, some who are really sharp and some that are really hurting. So I admire you guys that work way long hours in the CCO, hanging out with college students. Good for you.
Well, thanks, Byron. Well, for our listeners, I will warn you, we are doing some, I would say, cheating in this episode. It's the Three Books from Hearts and Minds podcast. We do have more than three books today, but we're gonna think of this as a part A and part B of today's episode, and each of those parts are going to include three books. So we're still technically within the bounds of what we set out to do every week here. So where are we going today, Byron?
Well, I'll tell you what, Sam. My friend Carmen Imes, who will be at our Jubilee conference this year, by the way, again, just a great biblical scholar. All summer, she's been doing weekly videos, and I've been inspired by them. And she calls it her two favorite books on a given topic: biblical poetry, biblical lament, overview of the Old Testament, the cultural background of the Old Testament. And in these podcasts or videos that she does two books at an entry level, two books at an intermediate level, and two books you got to know about if you're working on your PhD in biblical studies. So she gives 6 books in a video that's called Two Books from Carmen Imes. So she can cheat like that. I can cheat a little bit too.
Absolutely. All right. Well,
as you probably know, there's this movement amongst mostly evangelical churches, many of them reformed in their Presbyterian orientation, but not all, that have started centers for faith and work all over the country in big cities and some small towns. Many of them have mentors or fellows that they mentor for a year about thinking Christianly, about call and vocation and employment, about calling and career, about professional life, working in the work world, and what it means to have a kingdom vision to serve God as God is working to bring agents of reconciliation as salt and light into the work world. And that movement has begun probably 40 years ago. And to be honest, our bookstore has been a bit on the cusp of that. We worked for CCO. We found that Jubilee conference. It's 50th anniversary this year. And in the 50th anniversary of Jubilee, we talked about the integration of faith and learning so that students could think Christianly about their careers so that they might serve God once they get out into the work world. And that's part of the that CCO has, a really good and rare distinctive of the CCO's campus ministry, that they're equipping students to learn how to think faithfully about future jobs and careers. And so we've carried books around those themes and had a section on the work world. I had one sales rep probably 40 years ago that used to go around to stores all over the country. He said he knew of no other Christian bookstore that had a section in their shelves of faith and work. And that was 40 years ago. Well, now it's just a renaissance, and there's more titles than we could possibly talk about. You could go to our book notes, my weekly newsletter, and Google or put in the search engine, faith and work, and you'll find my yearly Labor Day columns. And to pick 3 of those is really, really hard. So these are not the 3 best. It's just 3 that I sort of thought would fit well for people maybe that know a little about this conversation, or maybe those that don't. So the first one is short, sweet, It's called Work That Makes a Difference. It's by a former CCO guy. So he's been at our Jubilee conference. He helped do this kind of work in the East for the CCO, went on and became a PCA pastor affiliated with the Great Covenant Seminary in St. Louis. And he is one of the co-directors of the Center for Faith and Work that we've mentioned, the Center for Faith and Work in St. Louis. He has a bigger book on a Christian philosophy of work. It's bright red, looks like this, and it's thick. One of the absolute best on the market. But this little one is one that he uses to mentor fellows that are learning about this faith and work conversation. And so it's short, it's sweet, it's how work is a created good in the Garden of Eden. It's a mandate given to Adam and Eve to be fruitful, multiply, and tend creation. So it's a good thing. It is also fallen by sin and ideology, so work isn't what it should be. And that in Christ, things are being restored and renewed, and we should have meaning and joy in the service that we provide to the community in our career, whatever they may be. So if you've ever wondered how you can serve God in your ordinary work and how that becomes a way to make a difference in the culture, in the lives of others, how you can contribute to making the world a better place, so to speak, this little study gets at it as well as anything I know. It's got some little charts, it's got some little graphs, and in every single section, he has case studies of individuals that are serving God as salt and light in the work world. He's looking at the redemption of work, the notion of vocation, calling into careers, what it looks like to find employment before the face of God. It is just a gem of a book, and it's multi-ethnic. It brings some neat distinctives, unlike other books that are out there that are only about, bankers and lawyers, the kind of high professions. He has some real good case studies of ordinary blue-collar workers in here as well. So anyway, I love this little book, and it's all about making a difference and being a transforming agent for God's kingdom as it tries to bring reform to the work world.
That's great. Sounds like a great intro. If you want to explore the intersection of faith and work, maybe that's something you haven't thought a lot about, and this will get you into that conversation.
It's got 9 chapters, and so you can go through it, in a couple of months. The chapters are all short. You could read 2 at a time and meet once a week or something. It's only 100 pages. And then there's a little appendix about faith and work projects that are going on, things you can do. It's a gem, and it's a great starter book for anyone that wants to put something into somebody's hands to get going on that. Well, the next one is what I think you probably know about. Sam, have you read Shop Class as Soulcraft?
I'm sad to say I have not, but it's one I've heard you talk a lot about, and I've heard only good things from those who've read it.
Well, it is, the subtitle is an inquiry into the value of work. Shop Class as Soulcraft. This is not what I would call an overtly Christian book, although actually as people read it, you think it is so wise and so profound and so substantive that you think this has got to be like a theologian or something that wrote it. He is not a person of faith when he was writing this book. Interestingly enough, I've heard sort of through the grapevine that he has now joined a church. And so Matthew Crawford is at least a church-going person of faith now. Whether he was back when he wrote this or not, I'm not sure, but he is now. So anyway, he's a Christian brother now, and Matthew Crawford wrote this book. And there's a bit of a story behind it. It's a little on the academic side, and so it's definitely a step above Dan Doriani's too. But what this is he worked, I think, in Charlottesville, Virginia, maybe some prestigious college. And he had a white-collar job. He was working in a think tank or something. He had a good career as a scholar, cranking out papers. And I think he said at the beginning of this book, one day he was just wondering if anybody even read what he wrote. Like, did it make any difference at all? And if they read it, did they present it at a conference and then go, did it even matter? And he came to realize that what he really wanted to do with his life is something that he could use his hands, that he could craft things with, that he could make. And at the end of the day, know what he did. Started a motorcycle repair shop in Roanoke, Virginia. And he started this shop. I have friends that have gone there because of the book. They've gone to see it. And he fixes motorcycles. He says at the beginning of the book, when you do your job, either it works or it doesn't. You've either fixed it or you haven't. And so you kind of have this fruit of whether you've accomplished something at the end of the day, whether you've made a good bike better or whether you've made a broken bike fixed. You know what you've done. Well, anyway, out of this shift from white collar work to craftsmanship with his blue collar hands, getting his fingers dirty and greasy, he ended up writing this meditation as a kind of white collar scholar. So this is not a simple book, and I wish there was something like this that was more accessible for blue collar workers, because it's one of the only books that really is brilliant about the significance of blue collar work. One of the things he says here is that we don't have shop classes as much in high schools anymore. And his voice, maybe a decade ago when he first wrote this, has maybe changed that a little bit. But we've moved what in those days we called the information economy. People were getting jobs in these abstract fields and programming computers and managing information. And nobody was going to shop class. If you need somebody to fix your refrigerator or fix your motorcycle or fix your computer, for crying out loud, maybe you can find a computer repair person. But if you need somebody that's like an HVAC or something, it is hard to find plumbers and butchers, bakers, and makers and repair guys because nobody goes to shop class anymore. And so he makes the case that education itself is become abstract and theoretical, and that a wiser view of education is training people to be wise in the ways of the world, which means doing stuff even with your hands. So you learn better when your learning is not abstract and distant, sort of experiential education that we even have talked about before in this podcast. So the experiential education piece and the working with your hands piece affirms the goodness of guys that are working in shop class. And he says, actually, with this abstract, the world outside your head kind of approach is different than the shop class where you're in the world making something, whether it's a violin or whether it's a refrigerator or whether it's a mechanical bridge. You know, you're fixing things, you're making things, and there's something wholesome about educating people to do that kind of work. So in a certain sense, it's a study of education. It's a study of shop classes, and it's a study largely about how to find meaningful work in this world of working with one's hands. So I adore this book. It's dense, it's thoughtful, it's eloquent in many ways, but it's not a simple read. But it's a sort of a philosopher who is also a mechanic. How about that? And that sort of says it all. It's also kind of funny at times. So I like this book a lot, Shop Classes, Soulcraft. He went on and wrote another book about abstraction and the technological world we live in where things are outside your head. That's a brilliant book. And then he wrote a book about how we like to drive. It's about kind of the mechanics of driving a car and why you enjoy driving so much. That's a fascinating little fun read too. But for today's three, Mr. Dan Doriani, I'm going to say Shop Classes, Soulcraft, an inquiry into the value of work.
Yeah, I think that one of the criticisms of a lot of the faith and work conversation has been that there's been an outsized focus on more kind of white collar jobs. And you mentioned that the Doriani book also brings in blue collar work, other types of work into that conversation, but this one especially so. So I think that's really important. No matter even for those of us who do work in a more white collar field, spend time on computers or using our brains more than our hands, need to also be in conversation about how that world of making things, of using our bodies more in our work is necessary and important for all of us.
In our last podcast, we talked about the art philosopher Calvin Serville. And in the Serville conversation, that came up a couple of times with our friend that we had on as a guest, Sean. We talked about embodiment and how God calls us to be full-orbed people in the world. And so this notion of working and creating, whether you're an artist or whether you're a mechanic, there's something to that that's different than just working in the thought economy. Not that there's anything wrong with being a thinker or an intellectual that's paid to write think pieces and thought pieces. Sure, we need that as well. But we've almost, as a culture, lost some of the significance and dignity of blue-collar work. Well, here's the third book I want to talk about, because any job you have, whether you're a mechanic or whether you're an office cubicle, whether you're an accountant or whether you're a landscape artist, you're going to have days where things don't go so well. And you bring your own darn soul and grumpy attitudes to work. So whether it's your own grumpy, hurtful attitudes, or whether it's your own sin, or whether it's the brokenness of this crazy, messed up world, things rarely go well in any area of life, and certainly not in the work world. So this is a book about how to cope with some of the sins and foibles of a broken work world, particularly when you yourself bring your own darn soul to work. It is called Taking Your Soul to Work. It's been out several years. I talk about it often. It is brilliant. It is called Taking Your Soul to Work. The subtitle is Overcoming the 9 Deadly Sins of the Workplace. Everybody's heard of the 7 deadly sins. He looks at 7 deadly sins, how they show up in typical jobs, maybe white collar jobs more than blue collar, because that's his experience. But he looks at how these different things, pride and lust and so forth, power, envy, how these sorts of foibles and sins of the classic 7 deadly sin variety, and then he adds 2 more that are unique to the modern work world. And he looks at these 9 particular trouble spots that we need to overcome if we're going to be faithful as Christians in the workspace. There's lots of talk about taking your faith into the work world, about connecting Sunday and Monday, about work and worship, sure. But once you get there, what the heck do you do? Once you've thought Christianly about it and you want to develop uniquely Christian practices to serve well, you still got to deal with lust and your gluttony and your anger and your sloth and your envy and your greed, right? Your pride. He adds restlessness and he adds boredom. Restlessness, you always want a better job, want to do something better, and boredom, that with work is drudgery sometimes. And so he adds those to the mix of these deadly sins, and that's only the first part. The second part, then, he gives life-giving resources for workplace spirituality. So he counters those 7 deadly sins, as many authors have done, with the fruits of the Spirit: joy, goodness, love, self-control, gentleness, and so forth. He shows how those fruits of the Spirit can show up in the typical workplace, what it means to give and receive, to have the strength of meekness, or to putting others at ease in your work environment. And then part 3 is 9 fruits of workplace spirituality, which are sort of the outcomes of a spirit-led life in the employment world. So in your world, as you're beginning to notice these sins, counter them with these virtues, what's going to happen then? What kind of outcomes can you expect? And the kind of gratitude and the purity that we begin to find in the work world. So this is a great book about spirituality. It's a great book about kind of living and embodying your faith, pushing back the darkness and taking on the fruits of the Spirit, and looking for good kingdom outcomes, particularly applied to the work world. So as we talk about Labor Day this year, you should think about how you're going to live that out, whatever your job is and wherever you find yourself. I think this is a really good book. The late, great Eugene Peterson wrote the foreword, and that sort of says something as well, how down to earth and solid it probably is.
That's great. Well, that brings us to the end of part A of today's episode. So these 3 books, great for if you want to get into these ideas around work, around how that connects to our Christian faith, what it means to be called to work, and different perspectives on that. But many of us, as we wrestle with these big ideas, as we think about those things, we also want to hear from how do people live this stuff out in the nuts and bolts of actual ordinary life. And so I think our part B today, these next 3 books, will get more into the practical side of this. Am I right?
Well, in a way, let's just say they're fun observations. I don't want to say these are noble or virtuous, although in a way they are. They're not teaching anything. They're just stories of people talking about the work world. I just think to get a Christian vision of our own work, it doesn't hurt just to enmesh yourself in a story. You could pick novels, you could put poems, but I just picked 3 memoirs where people tell their own story about a work encounter. And I just love all 3 of these books, each in their own way. And so I'm just going to tell you about them. The first one is by a great writer that I adore. I'd read anything he's done. I've read 2 of his books so far. Finn Murphy. His first book was about being a truck driver. And I thought, whatever. And I read this book. I could not put it down. It's a whole long, hefty book about his career as a mover. Well, then you find out that he got out of the moving business and he got into what they thought was sort of the next big boom out west, particularly Colorado and other places were funding farmers to grow hemp. Now, this is not marijuana. This is not for, psychedelic reasons. This was for the hemp industry, for health and for healing and for fabric. there was just going to be this new boom, or so they said a decade ago, and they were funding it. And you could buy up land and you could grow farming stuff. You could get rich on hemp. It was the new, the new gold rush. And so people were buying up land and getting these government grants. And he decides he's going to get rich doing this. And he invests everything he's got, even though he knows nothing about farming. He's like, how hard can it be? He read a couple of books. He watched some YouTube videos. He puts all his money, gets a relative to help him. He finds a couple of workers. And this is a year in the farming world, but he's farming hemp and then have to sell it to legitimate dealers. And in the first chapter, he calls a meeting of other hemp farmers that are there in the Boulder, Colorado area, thinking he can sort of learn from each other and he can learn from them. And the wiser guys can mentor the younger guys and they can maybe sell their stuff together and bounce ideas off of each other, real collaborative. Well, everybody's really skeptical. They're all in their own. They competition, for the marketplace. Nobody wants to cooperate. A couple of people show up and they're pretty grumpy about the whole thing. It is really a funny chapter and how disillusioned he becomes from day one. Well, you have to irrigate the stuff and there's different ways to do that. You have to sell it and there's different ways to do that. You have to hire workers. He hires a lot of undocumented immigrants to work for him. And some of them are really, really good workers, maybe others not so much. I adored this book. It's called Rocky Mountain High, The Tale of Boom and Bust in the New Wild West. So that's what it's called. It's written with, as one reviewer says, wit, pluck, and hard-won wisdom. I mean, it really is a glimpse into some of the stuff going on in the farming world. It's sort of a cautionary tale, if you will. Really written with wit. It's the hemp space and CBD products, are the big thing. And so he gets into the business. I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but it's a fun story of a kind of farmer entrepreneur working in Colorado. I bet you didn't expect to find a Christian bookseller talking about a guy in the CBD space, CBD products, plants. It was a booming business for a while. And I'll just tell you, it didn't go real well for him.
Well, I can't speak for all of our listeners, Byron, but I've known you long enough and have heard you talk about books long enough that my expectations are far and wide, if they exist at all, about what you're going to pull out. All I expect is you're gonna tell us to read widely, and you've got great books. So what else do we have?
I really do love this author. He just it's something about his style and his personality. When he read this one about cross-country trucking, I thought, man, I'd read anything this guy does. And this was the next one. And it was gripping. I mean, I really enjoyed this. Maybe it's because I'm a businessman, but you learn a bit about finances and money and farming and agribusiness and hiring people and family affairs and how things can go and the struggle with all that. And it's written with a lot of wit. I mean, he's a good guy. Well, the second one is a very different kind of tone. It's not witty in funny sense. It is elegant and eloquent. It's a gorgeously written book, a wonderful master of the craft of writing. And it is called The Lost Carving. I don't have to tell you too much about this. I might even have mentioned it before. The subtitle is A Journey into the Heart of Making. It's by David Esterly. And David tells the story in this book, beautifully written, about being a young boy and going with his family to Europe to visit some stuff. And they go in a cathedral in England. And in this old cathedral, they find woodworking that is just gorgeous, handsome carvings of the finest world-class stuff. And he came back and said, I want to learn to do that. And it's about him taking up the craft of being a woodworker because he was inspired by a church in England. But here's where it gets interesting. As he begins the craft and learns about this, that cathedral burned down. And they needed to replace it. They needed a woodworker that could renovate the damaged woodwork that inspired him as a boy, and he gets the job. And so the book is really about him restoring this wonderful cathedral that had burned and the incredible woodwork there that was the very place that inspired him to go into the woodworking craft in the first place. Elizabeth Gilbert, who's a great writer, says in the front of this, a beautiful, intricate meditation on creativity and discovery, on fire and birth, on culture and history. I mean, he looks at the history of this church and the history of woodworking. It's profound, it's wondrous, it's rich, it's a thoughtful book, it's a lovely written, well-written piece. If people just like a really good book about a visual artist, a woodworker, and just as one reviewer said, he can coax as much beauty from words as he does from his primary medium of wood. So anyway, this is about making, The Lost Carving, a journey into the heart of making. Great read, and it's very eloquent. I like it a lot.
Sounds really
So
fun.
we looked at a farmer, we looked at a woodworker. The third book about work that I'm going to read is not a memoir as such, more of an investigative journalist storytelling piece, a reporter. But in that sense, it's almost like a journal. I like a memoir because the journalist is embedding himself in the community to try to understand something. So it's his memoir as a writer, as a journalist, as a reporter, investigating the crisis in black lung disease amongst coal miners, particularly in West Virginia. The book is called Soul Full of Coal Dust. The subtitle is A Fight for Breath and Justice in Appalachia. It's by Chris Hamby. He has won the Pulitzer Prize. This is a spectacular book that analyzes public policy around healthcare for coal miners. Understand the story of why coal miners with black lung are struggling so much to get a fair process. He has to understand what black lung is, which means he has to understand what mining entails. And so it's a history of the coal mining industry in Western Pennsylvania, southwestern Pennsylvania, into West Virginia, down into the beginning of Kentucky. My grandfather died of black lung disease. So this means a lot to me. Anybody that's interested in coal mining, anybody that's interested in labor unions, anybody that's interested in Labor Day, crying out loud. This is the heart of the labor movement in America, is miners. And these oppressive, terrible working conditions in mines, in history, is documented here. Also, what's very, very interesting is how he documents how modern day coal mines are themselves still often reluctant to put in the safety procedures that they're supposed to put in the air monitors that are required by law. They cut corners, they don't do it right, and the miners, because they're desperate for their pay, have to go anyway. It is just not a simple process of saying, oh, the miners shouldn't do that. When you live in a little town in the middle of nowhere in southern West Virginia, and this is your only job and the only thing you and your grandfather, father, and grandmother have ever learned how to do, you just can't walk away from that. What else do you do? So you got to work in these dangerous conditions. This book is riveting. It is one of the best books I've ever read in my life. It is compulsively reading. It is infuriating. This was written back in a previous political administration. Under our current political regime, it's even worse, I can tell you that. So this is not about the Trump years or MAGA or any of that. But I'll tell you what, this is as relevant now as it was when it was written several years ago. Soul Full of Coal Dust, A Fight for Breath and Justice in Appalachia by the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Chris Hamby. What a book. Understand how some Americans have made their living.
Wow. I love those kind of books that are teaching you about a subject, but do so in the form of storytelling and similar to a memoir. And hey, you heard it here. Byron just said that's one of the best books he's read in his life. So that's
here's a quote from the back. This guy won a Pulitzer Prize himself for a book called Tom's River, set in New Jersey. Dan Fagan says it's an important story told with care and eloquence. Soul Full of Coal Dust will have you rooting for its underdog heroes and shaking your head, and maybe even your fist, at the coal barons and their hired guns who for decades manipulated a rigged system to deprive injured miners of simple justice. So it's not just the coal mining world, it's also the medical world and the insurance world and the public policy world of providing a fair and decent recompense to guys that have been documented with black lung disease.
Well, there we go. 6 books for you today. 3 books about faith and work, and 3 more telling stories about people who work. Any of those that you might be interested in, remember that you can get 20% off any books that you order from this episode. So thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate our listeners. If you want to place an order, check the first link in the episode description, and that'll take you to the order form at Hearts and Minds. Be sure to like and share, tell your friends about us, and we'd love to hear from you. Reach out. Are you reading these books? Are you reading books you've heard in other episodes, or other books that we ought to talk about and know about? So we'd love to hear from you. For Byron, Hearts and Minds Books, and the CEC, this has been another episode of the 3 Books from Hearts and Minds podcast. Have a great one, friends.